The 9th sitting of the Tobago House of Assembly Legislature will be held on Thursday, the 23rd of November, 2017 from 10 in the morning. In 2013, a decision was taken by the then members of the House to have a second debate on the Tobago budget after the national budget was read and Tobago's allocation was verified. Similarly, the motion this Thursday by Deputy Chief Secretary and Secretary of Finance and the Economy, Assemblyman Joel Jack, will be based on Tobago's 2018 allocation from central government and seek support from the House for measures to be implemented by the Executive Council in its efforts to mitigate against the impact of challenges in the national economy. As your presiding officer, Dr. Denise Soyafat-Angus, I invite you to join us for this significant debate, which is important to your future. This Thursday, the 23rd November from 10 a.m. I hope to see you there. Members, the light and guidance of your Holy Spirit, that we may wisely take counsel together and come to such decisions as shall promote your glory and the well-being of all our citizens in this our land, so that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be enjoyed by all people. Grant this for the sake of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Oath of allegiance of a new member. Announcements by presiding officer. Assembly bills sent back from Cabinet. Assembly laws brought back from Parliament. Petitions, papers, presentation of reports from Dispute Resolution Commission, select committees, Code of Conduct report. Questions to secretaries. Questions for oral answer.
Question number 17, Minority Leader.
Madam Presiding Officer, thank you for the opportunity to ask the question. The question is put to the Deputy Chief. Oh. I wish to correct that. Madam Presiding Officer, I wish to thank you again for your indulgence. The question is put this morning to the Chief Secretary and the Secretary of Education, Innovation and Energy. Given the reports of inappropriate accommodation for truckers on the Cobusta, limited access to cabins, non-functional toilets, etc., the modified ceilings of the TNT Express due to mechanical issues, and the fact that the last Caribbean Airlines flight from Tobago has been brought forward from 1:45 a.m. to 9:45 p.m. due to runway works at the airport, all resulting in an unreliable inter-island transportation system. And given the THA's responsibility for infrastructure, including air and sea transportation, wharves on airport and public utilities under the 5th schedule of the THA Act 40 of 1996, please provide an update on the provisions being made to provide for a reliable inter-island transportation system via air and sea bridge between Trinidad and Tobago.
Chief Secretary.
The question will give us.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, the preamble to the question is not entirely accurate. As a matter of fact, as I speak, there are no current roads running and flights do not service. That notwithstanding, pursuant to the Port Authority tender rules, the Port Authority issued a public invitation to tender, which was advertised on August 29, 2017 and September 1st, 2017 in the Trinidad Express and Newsday and the Tobago News on Friday the 1st of September 2017. 44 packages were collected. The tender closed on September 20th, 2017, and the tender box was opened publicly at 2:15 p.m. on instant date in the presence of some representatives. In response to the invitation to tender, there were 11 vessels submitted for consideration, which an evaluation committee deliberated on from October 17th to October 27th. And may I add, Madam Presiding Officer, that consistent with the promise made by the Honorable Prime Minister when he met the stakeholders, the Tobago House of Assembly did receive an invitation to nominate someone to sit on that evaluation committee, and we did oblige. Interestingly, the Tobago Chamber of the, division of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Commerce also received an invitation. And what is of particular import is that a subset of that committee really represent those who are stated in the question as the Truckers Association. The Chamber of Commerce, the Tobago Chamber of Commerce, declined to participate in the evaluation exercise. A report was submitted to the Port Authority Tenders Committee, which then requested additional information. That process is still ongoing.
Clarity on the question. The question was asked, please provide an update on the provisions being made to provide reliable inter-island transportation system via air and sea bridge between Trinidad and Tobago. We are quite aware that notice has been sent out regarding works to be done on the runway. And because the standing orders are so dubbed and styled that you have to ask the question way in advance, the question was asked when works was proposed to be done on the highway. So nevertheless, the relevance of the question still persists. When works commences on the highway, what provisions will be made on the runway highway?
Honorable Chief Secretary.
Madam Presiding Officer, the question as tabled has been answered.
I was expecting better.
Question 18, Minority Leader.
Thank you again, Madam Presiding Officer, for the opportunity to hold those on that side accountable. This question is put to the Secretary of Food, Production, Forestry, and Fisheries. Please provide a priority list of agricultural access roads and connector roads to be developed in Tobago during fiscal 2018 for the benefit of farmers and homeowners.
Secretary of Food, Production, Forestry, and Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, for fiscal 2017-2018, we'll be looking at Cardiff Road, Pembroke Phase 2, Richmond Orchard Road Phase 2, Mills Trace Goodwood, Richmond Branch Road, Roseboro Bay Road, Connecting Road at Lewis Door, Edwards Access Road at Louisdor, Roxborough River Road, Delaford Kings Bay Waterfall Road, Upper Richmond River, Upper Argyle Waterfall River. That is the road we'll be looking at for fiscal 2017-2018.
Question number 19, by Minority Leader.
Again, I stand and I thank you, Madam Presiding Officer, for the continuation of democracy in one of Tobago's best houses, Tobago's House of Assembly. Question 19 is posed to the Secretary of Sport and Youth Affairs. The use of Dwight York Stadium has been limited due to the need for infrastructural refurbishment, resulting in no access to the gym, no sporting activities after sunset because of the unavailability of lights on the field. Notwithstanding the board arrangement associated with the Dwight York Stadium, and taking into consideration the THA's responsibility for sport under the 5th schedule of the THA Act, what are the short-term plans to deal with the required infrastructural refurbishment of the facilities, which include the steel structure, the gym, and the lighting for the field?
Secretary of Sports and Youth Affairs.
Thank you. In response to the question posed, none.
Wow.
Question number 20 by the member for Palatuvia Lansumi Speyside.
Question number 20 to the Chief Secretary and Secretary of Education, Innovation and Energy. At the Wednesday, 15th March 2017 Post-Executive Council Media Briefing, the Chief Secretary indicated that with effect from April 2017, late pays will be a thing of the past. However, several workers have had late pays or late payments. Will the Chief Secretary explain to this House the reasons for several workers receiving salaries late?
Honorable Chief Secretary.
Madam Presiding Officer, there is always a danger in selectively quoting without context. There are 9 divisions in the Tobago House of Assembly. There are thousands of workers in the Tobago House of Assembly. There are thousands of workers in the private sector. Madam Presiding Officer, I shall be only too obliged to respond to the question when there is a certain level of specificity.
Will the Chief Secretary explain to this House why THA employees, several of them have received salaries late subsequent to that April 2017 press briefing?
Honorable Chief Secretary.
I have responded previously, Madam Presiding Officer. There are several workers across several divisions in the Tobago House of Assembly.
Member.
Is the Chief Secretary saying that he doesn't have his finger on the pulse and doesn't know when THA workers are being paid late?
No.
Okay. Question number 21 by the member for Palatuvia, Lansome, Speyside.
To the Chief Secretary and Secretary of Education, Innovation and Energy. According to Act 40 of 1996, Section 47, the central government is legally required to make transfers of appropriate funds quarterly. Will the Chief Secretary inform this House of the following? A, is the central government, contrary to the law, making transfers monthly? And B, if so, how long has the central government been making transfers on a monthly basis, and what measures does the THA plan to use to get the central government to obey the law?
Honorable Chief Secretary.
Madam Presiding Officer, the Ministry of Finance issued circular number 9 dated September 28, 2017 to permanent secretaries, heads of departments, and the Chief Administrator, Tobago House of Assembly, on the subject expenditure pending approval of the estimates for the financial year, October 1st, 2017 to September 30th, 2018. The circular referred to warrant dated September 28, which was issued in accordance with the provisions of Section 3 of the Expenditure in Advance of Appropriation Act, Chapter 6902. The Act allows the Minister of Finance to authorize the withdrawal of monies from the consolidated fund for the purpose of carrying on the services of the government from October 1st, 2017 to October 31st, 2017, or to the coming into operation of the Appropriation Act 2018, whichever is earlier. This takes into consideration the time required for the budget debate to be completed and the budget being assented to prior to the beginning of the fiscal period. The THA was included in the warrant and received 10% of the 2017 allocation for the month of October as per the Appropriation Act. Releases were requested for the months of November and December 2017, and releases for November was received. It is anticipated that releases for December will be received shortly. It is pertinent to note that similarly in fiscal 2016-17, releases for the month of October 2016 were received in accordance with the provision of Section 3 of the Act that I just mentioned, and releases for the months of November and December 2016 issued subsequently. Releases for the second, third, and fourth quarters of fiscal 2016-2017 were received in the months of January 2017, April 2017, and July 2017 respectively in accordance with the Act.
Is the Executive Council satisfied with how releases are made?
At this time, Madam Presiding Officer, there is no dissatisfaction.
Question number 22 by the member for Palatuvia Lansumi, Speyside.
Question number 22 to the Secretary of Tourism, Culture and Transportation. International recording artist D'Angelo was a no-show at the Tobago Jazz Experience 2017 after being paid by the Tobago House of Assembly. Can the Secretary update this House on the process for recovering such monies paid to D'Angelo?
Secretary of Tourism, Culture and Transportation.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, I wish to inform this Honorable House that 11 Entertainment Company Limited was contracted to procure the services of D'Angelo on behalf of the Tobago House of Assembly for the Tobago Jazz Experience 2017. Several attempts were made through the legal department to recover monies paid to the company, and no favorable feedback was received. The legal department was instructed to initiate legal action against 11 Entertainment Company Limited.
Question number 23 by the Minority Councillor.
Good morning. Question to the Deputy Chief Secretary and Secretary of Finance and the Economy. The THA monthly reports, which are these documents provided to us every month, provide information about monthly expenditure and commitments from the contingency/contingencies account. The two words are used in the report, without providing information on opening and closing balances at the beginning and the end of the reporting period. And I note that it is not to be confused with the balances on releases as reported in the said tables. Please provide an update on the closing balance on the contingency/contingencies account of the THA as at the 30th of September 2017, and particularly compare it to the closing balance as at the 30th of September in 2016.
Deputy Chief Secretary and Secretary of Finance and the Economy.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. The opening balance of the contingencies account for fiscal 2016-17 was $16,783,005, and the closing balance at the end of this fiscal year was $17.5 million.
Request
for leave to move the adjournment of the Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance. Statement by secretaries or assistant secretaries. Personal explanations. Introduction of bills. Motions relating to the business or sitting of the Assembly and moved by a secretary or assistant secretary. Public business. Executive Council business. Motion.
Deputy Chief Secretary and Secretary of Finance and the Economy, Assemblyman Joel Jack.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer, and I stand to move this motion in my name. And it reads, Madam Presiding Officer, and whereas the Tobago House of Assembly, in accordance with Section 41 of the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996, debated, approved, and submitted its estimates of revenue for fiscal 2018 to the Cabinet. And whereas the precipitous decline in energy prices and its concomitant impact on central government revenues resulted in an overall reduction in the national budget from $53.5 billion in 2017 to $50 billion in fiscal 2018. And whereas the implication of this reduction must be shared by all ministries, institutions, and citizens, including the Tobago House of Assembly, and whereas the allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly total $2.1936 billion, or 4.34% of the national budget, and whereas in accordance with Section 25, subsection 2 of the Tobago House of Assembly Act, the Executive Council is mandated to do all in its powers to manage the affairs of Tobago and to advance the island's socioeconomic development agenda, be it resolved that this House accept the policy measures recommended by the Executive Council to manage the financial resources of the Tobago House of Assembly for fiscal 2018 in order to continue the island's developmental thrust and to minimize any adverse impact on the people of Tobago, and be it further resolved that this House support the plans of the Executive Council to mitigate against the challenges in the national economy, and that all Tobagonians in this critical period be encouraged to maximize productivity, service excellence, and contribute to economic resilience as we seek to restore Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago to a path of sustained economic growth. Madam Presiding Officer, thank you for allowing me to move this motion in my name. And because of the nature of the motion, as its President, I'll be reading a lot from a prepared text, with your leave, of course. Thank you. Madam Presiding Officer, once again, I have the privilege to stand before this Honorable House to present this critical motion which deals with the reallocation of the budgetary resources of the Tobago House of Assembly for fiscal 2018. As has become customary since 2013, this exercise is primarily geared towards sharing with the people of Tobago and the wider national community the adjustments to the fiscal priorities of the Tobago House of Assembly, which need to be made in response to the budgetary funding gaps emanating from the recent national budget approved by the Parliament. Madam Presiding Officer, the intent of this motion is not to present a new Tobago House of Assembly budget or to table revised estimates, but to indicate the priority programs and projects of the Assembly for fiscal 2018 in view of our current economic realities. We will also highlight the strategies the Assembly proposes to undertake in order to maintain this island's development momentum. Madam Presiding Officer, notwithstanding the financial constraints affecting the Twin Island state, I want to give the people of Tobago the assurance that this Assembly will continue to foster an environment that protects, preserves, and enhances the quality of life of all Tobagonians while keeping our long-term developmental goals in focus by ensuring more prudent management of the Assembly's budgetary resources. Madam Presiding Officer, it is no secret that our nation is at a very critical juncture in its development, with a loss of petroleum revenues of approximately 90% over the last 3 years, from $20.9 billion to $2.8 billion in 2017. It is therefore required for each of us to play our part in assisting our country through these challenging economic times. I have every confidence that if we do, our nation will become more resilient and more productive. All of us must commit to making the necessary structural changes for rebuilding our economy and restoring growth. Madam Presiding Officer, my presentation today follows some broad thematic areas. I will begin by examining the international, regional, and national economic environment to set the context for the fiscal adjustments for 2018. I will look at Tobago's development needs and strategic priorities for fiscal 2018 as outlined in the Tobago House of Assembly's budget statement. I will examine the extent of the budgetary funding gap of the Assembly following the parliamentary appropriations from central government in the national budget. And following this, I will discuss our proposed fiscal adjustments and strategic priorities for fiscal 2018 given the Assembly's allocation. I will also examine some of our proposed budgetary financing strategies as well as measures to curtail expenditure, and I will end by examining some of the Assembly's longer-term strategic initiatives to foster diversification and transformation of this island's economy. Madam Presiding Officer, the global economies continue to grow at a moderate pace, which is expected to continue over the next year. The latest IMF projections indicate that global economic growth will be 3.7% in 2018, marginally higher than the forecast of 3.6% in 2017. However, growth in the more developed countries is projected to slow to 2% in 2018, while in the emerging markets and developing countries, growth will accelerate to 4.9% in 2018, up from 4.6% forecasted for 2017. The pace of the expansion compared to the period before the so-called Great Depression is due to the slowing down of China's fast-paced growth, as well as slower growth in energy exporting countries. Even in the more developed countries, there are concerns about slowing productivity growth, rising inequality, and aging populations, and the implications of these for achieving faster growth in the medium term. Indeed, the IMF is projecting that economic growth in the more developed countries will continue to slow down to 1.7% by 2022. Madam Presiding Officer, of perhaps greater concern is the threat posed by geopolitical stability by one, increased tensions in Asia, as North Korea builds nuclear strike capabilities at a faster pace. 2, political instability in the Middle East and Turkey as ISIS crumbles and the Kurds seek to assert sovereignty. 3, the migrant crisis and Brexit in Europe. And 4, a radically different foreign policy posture on the part of the Donald Trump administration. These geopolitical factors engender uncertainty and cause investors to be more circumspect. This in turn reduces economic growth as investment expenditure lags. In respect of the global markets for oil and natural gas, the moderate expansion is continuing to drive up demand for these products, which of course are of direct interest to us here in Trinidad and Tobago. However, the demand for oil and natural gas is increasing, but at a slower pace because of investments being made in energy efficiency, the push to shift to electric vehicles in the transportation sector, and the increased utilization of renewable energy sources, in particular wind and solar energy. The cost of renewable energy has been falling quite sharply, and several countries, in the context of the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, have embraced investments in renewables and the integration of these into their electricity grid. The shale oil and gas industry in the United States has become a significant factor in the evolution of the oil and natural gas industry and the outlook for prices of these commodities. The United States Energy Information Administration is projected that the United States will produce 9.9 million barrels of oil per day in 2018, exceeding the previous highest level set in 1970. As a result, even in the face of OPEC production restraint, current projections for oil and gas prices remain flat through to 2021, as shale production is expected to exert a depressing effect on prices. However, on a more positive note, it is unlikely that crude oil and natural gas prices will fall back to the levels seen in early 2016. Regionally, CARICOM and the Dominican Republic markets are of considerable importance to many of our manufacturers in Trinidad and Tobago. The projections for growth in these economies vary from strong growth in the Dominican Republic and Guyana to considerably weaker growth in Barbados and the OECS. Jamaica is projected to experience moderate but steadily improving growth over the medium term. Madam Presiding Officer, by comparison, the Trinidad and Tobago economy is projected to contract in 2017 by 3.2%. However, modest growth is projected for 2018 following expected increases in the production of natural gas and the halting of the decline in crude oil production. We should also see some increase in the production of petrochemicals in 2018, and as the gas shortage is progressively alleviated over time. The availability of foreign exchange remains a major concern for business activity, and the industrial relations climate remains difficult. In addition, the non-energy economy will be adversely affected by the curtailment of government expenditure and as well as tighter banking system liquidity. The IMF is projecting a decline in economic activity of about 1.2% in the non-energy sector in 2018. Madam Presiding Officer, it must be said and said again that economic mismanagement at the national level over the period 2010 to 2015 has contributed in no small measure to the economic difficulties we are now experiencing. Madam Presiding Officer, we in Tobago are not immune from the factors affecting the larger national and global economy. Additionally, the ongoing difficulties with the sea bridge and occasional challenges with the air bridge adversely impact business activity and productivity on the island. While we are on record insisting that the situation is untenable and that Tobago needs a more reliable service, we continue to work with the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago and Caribbean Airlines to resolve the current challenges that we are experiencing with the inter-island transportation system. Madam Presiding Officer, in light of the reduced financial resources available to the Tobago House of Assembly, it would also be reasonable to expect a corresponding contraction of the Tobago economy in fiscal 2018. And then we therefore have a responsibility to do what we have to and to find creative ways to treat with our current situation. What is important is that we maintain expenditure to support the poor and vulnerable in our society, and that we maintain as strong as capital expenditure program as possible in order to prepare for the next phase of growth. Madam Presiding Officer, the macroeconomic environment in Tobago remains quite favorable. As it relates to GDP, data from the most recent survey of business establishments conducted by the Division of Finance and the Economy earlier this year suggests that the real GDP in Tobago grew from $1.81 billion in 2014 to approximately $1.97 billion at the end of 2016. Both inflation and unemployment on the island have been kept to manageable levels. The latest data from the CSO indicates that at the end of the fourth quarter 2016, the rate of unemployment on the island was approximately 3.7%. As it relates to inflation, as at the end of September 2017, the rate of headline inflation in Tobago was about 2.6%, while core inflation was 2.3%, and the rate of food price inflation averaged 4.6%. These figures show that the prudent economic management undertaken by the Tobago House of Assembly has kept things under control, and that Tobago has not experienced any severe impact as a result of the economic downturn. Madam Presiding Officer, prior to my presentation of the Assembly's budget for fiscal 2018, the Division of Finance and the Economy engaged, as we usually do, in extensive consultations with some of the primary stakeholders in Tobago. The Division of Finance and Economy also conducted a pre-budget survey where we solicited the views of Tobagonians, and approximately 650 persons participated in the survey. Following these discussions, the survey, and drawing on the proposals set out in the Manifesto of the People's National Movement in the 2017 Tobago House of Assembly elections, we identified 11 strategic priority areas for the Tobago House of Assembly. These are building economic resilience, fostering innovation and creativity, 3, supporting our tourism industry, 4, revitalizing our agricultural sector, 5, developing our human capital, 6, providing housing opportunities, 7, enhancing healthcare delivery, 8, fostering and stimulating rural development, 9, holistic development of young adults, 10, preserving our pristine national environment, and 11, empowering and building communities. Madam Presiding Officer, a close examination of these priority areas will indicate that they aim to achieve sustainable and inclusive growth for Tobago. For instance, we will focus on building economic resilience because we believe that given the structure of the Tobago economy, it is important that we seek to reduce our vulnerabilities to the vagaries of the international economic environment. At the core of our growth and diversification strategy we sought to draw on the creativity and the innovative capabilities of our people. Both the tourism and agricultural sectors are also central to our strategy for economic expansion. Madam Presiding Officer, I will say no more on these fiscal priorities, as I would allow my colleagues to elaborate on their respective areas in turn during the debate. Madam Presiding Officer, at this time, please permit me to examine the budgetary allocations to the Tobago House of Assembly arising out of the recent national budget and the extent of the budgetary funding gap of the Tobago House of Assembly. Madam Presiding Officer, you recall that for fiscal 2018, the Tobago House of Assembly requested a total of $4.98 billion from the central government, of which $3.198 billion was requested for recurrent expenditure, $1.71 billion was requested for URP, and $55 million for CPEP. For fiscal 2018, the budgetary allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly total $2.193 billion, of which $1.86 billion will be for recurrent expenditure, $315.7 million for capital expenditure, $18 million for URP, and $5 million for CPEP. Given the size of the national budget of $50.5 billion, the budgetary allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly is consistent with the Dispute Resolution Commission's ruling of 2001, which stipulates that the Assembly be allocated at least 4.03% to 6.9% of the national budget for recurrent and development program expenditures. The allocation for the Tobago House of Assembly for fiscal 2018 is approximately 4.34% of the national budget. Madam Presiding Officer, notwithstanding the fact that the budget allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly for fiscal 2018 is consistent with the DRC ruling, because the national pie is significantly smaller, the overall allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly is about $160 million, or 7% lower than the allocation in fiscal 2017. As it relates to recurrent expenditure, the allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly for fiscal 2018 is $186 million, or 9% less than the $2.045 billion that was allocated for fiscal 2017. For fiscal 2018, the allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly for recurrent expenditure represented only about 8% of what was requested in our June budget statement. As it relates to the development program, the allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly for fiscal 2018 is about $26.6 million, or 9% higher than the $289 million that was allocated to the Assembly for fiscal 2017. For fiscal 2018, the allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly for development program expenditure from the central government represents only 18% of our request. As it pertains to the URP, the allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly for fiscal 2018 is approximately $2 million, or 10% less than the $20 million that was allocated in fiscal 2017. Madam Presiding Officer, beyond the direct parliamentary appropriations to the Assembly, there is another $1.09 billion allocated to facilitate work by several central government ministries in Tobago in keeping with their statutory obligations under the 6th schedule of the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996. These projects are mainly geared towards improving the security architecture in Tobago, improving the island's water security, and enhancing TNTEC's port generating capacity on the island. Some of the projects carded for financing under this medium include the construction of the Old Grange and Roxborough police stations at a cost of $10 million each, the upgrade of the Dwight York Stadium at a cost of $5 million, the expansion of TNTEC generating capacity at a cost of $94 million, the desilting and rehabilitation of the Hillsborough Dam in Tobago at a cost of $6 million, the construction of new wells, water wells costing $7 million, and the rehabilitation of the Scarborough wastewater treatment plant at a cost of $3.4 million. What this means is that together with the development program expenditure by the Tobago House of Assembly for fiscal 2018, we expect approximately $1.6 billion in construction-related activity in Tobago, and this will generate economic activity and continue the pace of infrastructure development on the island. Madam Presiding Officer, notwithstanding the budgetary funding gaps faced by the Assembly, as an administration, we remain committed to ensuring that Tobago's developmental momentum is sustained. Let me say that again, Madam Presiding Officer. Notwithstanding the budgetary funding gaps faced by the Assembly, as an administration, we remain committed to ensuring that Tobago's developmental momentum is sustained. Madam Presiding Officer, as I indicated during the debate on the last motion brought by the minority bench, this administration has been proactive as far as our budgetary planning process is concerned. Since I presented the budget for fiscal 2018 in June of this year, all divisions of the Assembly were mandated by the Executive Council to examine different scenarios if the Tobago House of Assembly we were to experience any reduction in our allocation for fiscal 2018. This was done as a proactive measure to assess the likely implications of any reduction in the allocation to the Assembly on Tobago and to devise strategy to reduce the impact of any reduction in budgetary... sorry, Madam Presiding Officer. Stop staring and disturbing me. This was done as a proactive measure to assess the likely implications of any reduction in the allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly on Tobago and to devise strategies to reduce the impact of any reduction in budgetary allocation on the people of Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, our budgetary planning did not end there. Since the national budget was presented, the Chief Secretary, Honorable Kelvin Charles, led a two-day post-budget retreat on the 6th and 7th of October, which included members of the Executive Council, administrators, senior management staff of the various divisions of the Assembly. The primary objectives of the retreat were to review the Tobago allocation and the implications of the budgetary cuts on the Tobago economy, to devise strategies and initiatives to improve efficiency throughout the Assembly by optimizing existing resources. And at that two-day post-budget retreat, Madam Presiding Officer, the issues discussed included a review of the budget estimates, the outlining of specific plans for expenditure control, key development program project identification, productivity improvement plans and options, as well as the role of critical sectors such as tourism, agriculture, and agro-processing, as well as specialized services in the transformation of the Tobago economy. Madam Presiding Officer, only recently, the Executive Council engaged in a rigorous exercise to revisit and reprioritize the developmental agenda of the Assembly for fiscal 2018 in keeping with our mandate to continue our developmental momentum. At these discussions, each division was required to identify their priority projects, and as a team, we deliberated to arrive at the Assembly's priority projects for fiscal 2018. Madam Presiding Officer, in arriving at the overall set of priority projects for the Assembly, we considered and gave high priority to ongoing projects and those for which there was prior approval and commitment, projects for which contractual obligations exist, and projects for which tenders have already been invited or received, projects for which pre-investment activities have been completed, and projects that are likely to have a positive impact on employment, economic diversification, the environment, and income distribution, and capital projects that are sustainable over the short term and are revenue generating.
You have 10 minutes remaining.
Madam Presiding Officer, just for clarity, I would have an additional 10 after that.
No, the mover of the motion has 40 minutes. Yes.
Thank you, Madam. I'm so guided. Madam Presiding Officer, the projects were evaluated and selected on the basis of these criteria and provision for accordingly. The list of projects was approved by the Executive Council and ranked in priorities 1, 2, and 3. Please allow me to just highlight a few of these projects. We have provision for the Unemployment Relief Program, the sum of $45 million, the Community-Based Environmental Protection Program, or CPEP, $20 million, the Studley Park restructuring, major improvements to secondary roads, the Milford Road bridges, the road resurfacing program, the program for the upgrade of road efficiency pure, the Windward Road Special Development Program, a coastal zone protection program, the Charlottesville Mini Mall, the Adventure Mini Mall, the Plymouth Andersville Road, the Orange Hill Road, the Lansome Charlottesville Road, the Roxborough Bloody Bay Road, the Cove Tier 3 Data Center, the Tobago Tourism Agency, tourism project sites and attractions, agricultural access roads, renovation of the old Scarborough Market, upgrade of the Belgarden Community Center, construction of new health centers, Corland Development Phase 2, the Scarborough Enhancement Program, and the Enterprise Assistance Program. Madam Presiding Officer, a detailed examination of the full range of these THA priority projects will indicate two striking features. One, the projects, their impact, they will impact a wide range of sectors and cover all divisions of the Assembly. And two, the projects are all geared to positively impact the standard of living and the quality of life of Tobagonians. We propose to treat with the funding gap for fiscal 2018 by doing the following. One, limiting recurrent expenditure to $1.69 billion, net of any extraordinary payment, and transfer the difference estimated at $170.2 million to finance THA per expenditure. We'll deploy contingencies account resources estimated at $66.7 million to fund the 2018 budgetary shortfall and utilize borrowings in the sum of approximately $250 million to fund key development projects. Madam Presiding Officer, looking at the picture as a whole, we estimate that our mobilization efforts will result in a total of approximately $561 million. But Madam Presiding Officer, these are the primary adjustments we propose to make to our budget as we adjust our fiscal priorities to treat with our new economic circumstances. This is projected to result in a reduction in recurrent expenditure without any adverse impact on employment levels in the Tobago House of Assembly. Let me see that again. This will result in a reduction in recurrent expenditure without any adverse impact on employment across the Tobago House of Assembly. Madam Presiding Officer, this administration is mindful of the fact that the financial resources of the state are not infinite. And we are also mindful of our country's current economic difficulties, as well as the overwhelming quantum of requests that have been made on the national purse. As a responsible administration, we believe that our country's current fiscal position demands that we find new and creative ways to generate revenues and to find ways to reduce expenditure as we continue our policy mandate to increase our contribution to the national economy. Madam Presiding Officer, this administration aims to reduce discretionary expenditure by 1, the establishment of procurement units throughout the Assembly and the implementation of improved efficiency across all departments of the Assembly by adopting more stringent performance-based management systems, placement of a greater emphasis on the implementation of cost reduction measures, reduction in minor equipment purchases in fiscal 2018, reduction of expenditure on overseas trips, reduction of expenditure in the cost of assemblies function, and a reduction of expenditure on festivals, inclusive of Carnival, Jazz, and the Heritage Festivals. As it relates to revenue generation, Madam Presiding Officer, the Assembly proposes to undertake several initiatives over the next fiscal year to enhance its revenue generating capacity and to supplement our budget reallocation from central government. 2 of these initiatives will include expanding the revenue generating capacity at least on the Park Quarry and the introduction of fees at tourist sites and attractions across Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, just before I close, please permit me to highlight 2 of our alternative financing mechanisms to supplement our funding gap. These will include the utilization of public-private partnerships, or P3s, borrowing on the domestic market, and the use of grant funding and technical assistance from regional and international multilateral agencies. Madam Presiding Officer, just please permit me to touch on these briefly. With respect to our P3 program, over the past few months, we have advanced our P3 program. I'm finished? Oh, sorry, Madam Presiding Officer.
You have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. And this was facilitated by an existing technical cooperation agreement with the Inter-American Development Bank's Multilateral Investment Program. And that unit has also been set up, Madam Presiding Officer. But Madam Presiding Officer, I know I will have time in my wind-up, and I also allow my colleagues to treat with some issues. But as I close, Madam Presiding Officer, let me conclude my presentation just as I started. I want to reiterate the commitment of this administration, the commitment that we gave to the people. This administration, this Tobago House of Assembly is committed to ensuring that the island's developmental momentum is sustained. We continue to manage the island's financial resources in a way that brings optimal benefit to the people of Tobago and to minimize any adverse consequences on our people. As responsible citizens, we cannot be oblivious to our country's economic challenges, and we must all play our part in assisting our country to adjust in these difficult times. I have every confidence, Madam Presiding Officer, that if we all play our part, our country will emerge from our current economic challenges stronger and more resilient. I beg to you.
Members, the question proposed is whereas the Tobago House of Assembly, in accordance with Section 41 of the THA Act 40 of 1996, debated, approved, and submitted its estimates of revenue and expenditure for fiscal 2018 to the Cabinet. And whereas the precipitous decline in energy prices and its concomitant impact on central government revenues resulted in an overall reduction in the national budget from 53.5 billion in 2017 to 50 billion in fiscal 2018. And whereas the implication of this reduction must be shared by all ministries, institutions, and citizens, including the Tobago House of Assembly. And whereas the allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly totaled 2.1936 billion, or 4.34% of the national budget. And whereas in accordance with Section 25(2) of the THA Act, the Executive Council is mandated to do all in its powers to manage the affairs of Tobago and to advance the island's socio-economic development. Be it resolved that this House accept the policy measures recommended by the Executive Council to manage the financial resources of the Tobago House of Assembly for fiscal 2018 in order to continue the island's developmental thrust and to minimize any adverse impact on the people of Tobago. And be it further resolved that this House support the plans of the Executive Council to mitigate against the challenged national economy, and that all Tobagonians in this critical period be encouraged to maximize productivity, service excellence, and contribute to economic resilience as we seek to restore Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago to a path of sustained economic growth. Member for Palatuvia, Lansumi, Speyside.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. You know, this morning, when I woke, I was between two minds as to whether I should make it to the House today. Because to wake and realize that you're still suffering from a lingering flu, the symptoms of that, and to get ready and walk out the road as I do, catch a car as I do, to come to the House. I mean, the easier thing would have been to just staying today and rest up. But I decided that this sitting was far too important to miss. More so, my good friend, or my good friends from Scarborough Calder Hall and the leader of government business last month said to me, "See you in November." And I know that they would be anxiously anticipating my presence here. And so I couldn't disappoint my friends who said, "See you in November." I had to show up. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing my friend from Scarborough Calder Hall. If you can recall, Madam Presiding Officer, last month, we tabled a motion asking for the Secretary of Finance and the Economy and the Executive Council to posit in this House a new budget that will be complete with new estimates. We were told then that this motion is redundant. We always do that. And then the Secretary of Finance and the Economy shows up this morning and says that, you know, this is not a new budget. with new estimates, but really it is to highlight priority areas. I said last month that folks were playing smart with shoppiness, and I'm wondering if we have now gone to the place of just shoppiness. I expected a magnanimous approach, to use the favorite word of the Secretary of Finance. But what we got this morning was anything but magnanimous. Sure. We understand that these are difficult economic times. In fact, the Secretary for Finance, being a man of faith as I am, he certainly will tell you that these are definitely the last days, as things get worse, and not even incrementally worse globally, but as things are approaching cataclysmic levels. These are challenging times, no doubt, and we understand very well from this side that these are challenging times. And we understand that it is our role, our function, to assist those in the majority with ensuring that this island remains governable, with ensuring that things run as smoothly as possible, to ensure that Tobagonians don't suffer unduly, notwithstanding the difficult economic times in this country, across the region, and across the world. We understand that. We understand that despite being a sovereign country, that our realities are not disjointed from the realities of the region and the realities of the world. And so we understand the climate that we are in. And we understand that now more than ever, there must be a call for extraordinariness in our approach to governance, and more so to managing the economy of Tobago. Now, the Secretary sought early on in his presentation, in talking about the fortunes, or rather misfortunes, of Trinidad and Tobago, to lay blame squarely on the preceding central government, or the People's Partnership. And I too will join him in saying that some of our problems stem from their bad management. I agree with that. But I want to extend that by saying that some of the same serious bad management, bad governance principles, bad style of leadership exists in the Executive Council of the Tobago House of Assembly, and has existed in the Tobago House of Assembly these past 16 years. In fact, I am going to go further, to use this slogan, and say that the Executive Council in Tobago, more precisely, the PNM Executive Council Tobago, that we have had for almost 2 decades now, is just as bad as the People's Partnership, or in fact worse than the People's Partnership, given that they have been in power longer. In fact, they're even worse. Some of the same things I hear the Honorable Prime Minister and his ministers talking about with previous ministers exist in Tobago as normal, as being the normal way of doing business. And so if we are to ensure that Tobagonians are not unduly pressured by the state of the national economy and by the challenges regionally and internationally, then we have to look ourselves in the mirror, and we have to decide to change our political behaviors. And I could say here confidently, nobody on this side ever got the opportunity to spend, to use, to manage Tobago's financial resources. And so, and you're right, we don't even have an office, despite trumpeting that. We don't even have an office. Despite trumpeting that one we provided. But notwithstanding all of that, we have never had that opportunity. And we will not, well, I don't know if you should be so happy, Because when we look at the mismanagement of Tobago, you all on that side have to take 100% of the responsibility, all of it. I know if this side was in charge, plenty of people will be in jail.
That's right.
And so the Executive Council must look in the mirror and do some introspection, because those same attributes that led to our national economic conditions today is what was practiced and is practiced in Tobago by the PNM Executive Council. The Secretary for Finance and Economy said that Tobago has not experienced any severe impact as a result of the national downturn. Well, I want to invite the Secretary for Finance and Economy to do something extraordinary. And in fact, I'll also invite the Chief Secretary to join him. And I am putting an open invitation now for them to join me on one of my walkabouts in my constituency. To join me as we walk and touch base with ordinary people. You see, when in the Executive Council, the only lifestyle you know might be the VIP lifestyle.
Sure.
And walking and talking and touching base with ordinary citizens might not be part of the job spec, or so they have made it out to be. Yeah. But I want to invite them to join me as I touch base with ordinary Tobagonians, because I'm sure ordinary Tobagonians will say something differently. It doesn't make sense we come to this house and we create this false image. We posture ourselves as though everything is okay, as if people are not feeling the downturn of the economy, as if things are not getting harder. That does no one any good. It doesn't do the Executive Council any good, and it doesn't do Tobagonians any good. A better approach would be to honestly look at the situation on the ground in Tobago and work with Tobagonians, ordinary and extraordinary Tobagonians, to remedy the problems that we have. Burying our heads in the sand won't help us. It won't change our fortunes and our misfortunes. Right. So to say that, you know, there are no severe impact, things hard in Trinidad, but things aren't really that hard in Tobago, things nice here, right. You know, that is a great untruth. And you ask ordinary Tobagonians and they are feeling more than a pinch. In fact, they're feeling as though somebody is strangling them at their necks. And we must be honest in how we approach the matter of our economy.
Very honest.
But what is the state of Tobago? And we hear all of these glamorized figures about the macroeconomic fundamentals of the island. And the thing about statistics is that people could throw statistics conveniently around to match a context they create so that they can sell their story. I mean, that's common. But what's the state of this island? What will you get if you drive around this island? What does the island look like at this moment? How do people feel? How do they operate at this moment? And I'll tell you this. You drive around this island, and I'll talk to my constituency specifically. You drive around the island and drive up to my side where I live. We have perhaps some of the poorest road maintenance happening on my side of the island. I came to this house previously, and I asked a question about these works gangs being short-staffed. The Chief Secretary, in answering response on behalf of the Secretary who was out at that sitting, sort of rubbished the claim, left it, didn't ignore it almost, like that's a non-issue. If it was parliamentary, probably would have stooped and sit down. When the reality is, and I'm not asking, but I'm saying as a matter of fact, because my father is a foreman on the road, and I know for a fact that he has a gang with just two workers, to do the same maintenance schedule that his gang that previously had about 7 men must do. And his gang is not the only one short-staffed. You drive along Hermitage Road, the reason why the work can't get done, there and the road, Hermitage Road, can't be maintained properly is because we just don't have sufficient maintenance workers on the ground. And perhaps that's a physical reflection of the state of this island. Everything is just, it's an island of wax. Everything at standstill, nothing happening. People just there wondering what's next. What are we doing? People spinning tops in mud. The place just overgrown. And perhaps that's a physical reflection of how this island is being managed. And that's something that we have to deal with frontally. Recently, someone sent me photos of ambulances just parked up, bush growing out of the ambulances. And I'm asking, what is our maintenance regime and protocols for these vehicles? Meanwhile, I'll have a 92-year-old man falling ill at the dead of night in Charlottesville. The family owns only a pickup van. Obviously, they can't take him in a pickup van because it's too high off the ground. And in the middle of the night, we are going around the village asking for somebody to take a 92-year-old man to the hospital. When the expectation is that if people pay health surcharge all their lives, and if we run a public healthcare service, that the public healthcare service must deliver when people get sick. Because the reality is that most of us don't get sick as often. And so for the few of us who do get sick often, and we're talking about those who are aged, those most vulnerable, those very young, then we have to provide proper healthcare service, and that's part of the state of this island. So I don't know what we're boasting about. I made the mistake earlier this year of saying, you know what, I am going to give a few book bags and school shoes to folks who need it. And I was alarmed, almost taken aback by a number of persons who were in dire need. And we cannot pretend away our economic misfortunes. All of our economic misfortunes are not the result of our own doing, but that's how the economy of any island, any country, any state works. You can't control external forces. You can't control what happens outside of your precinct. And so you will be impacted by things that you have no control over. But pretending that there isn't a problem will not solve the problem. The problem will remain. And so what we should have heard this morning was a critical analysis of the problem, one, and two, a strategic way of us going forward. But I won't be preemptive because I expect the secretaries to add some meat and some flesh to what the Secretary of Finance would have said. When we also talking about the state of Tobago, we also talking about the fact that late salaries have become the new normal. Yeah. And then I am shocked that the Chief Secretary will stand up here today and find roundabout ways to refuse to respond, simply because I didn't say specifically which groups of people are getting their salaries late. Oh. But if you check most daily paid workers, they are all getting their salaries late. They don't even know when it's trust week from when it's fortnight. No. Oh. And to pretend that that has not happened, to pretend that it isn't happening, is to pretend that we do not have a problem. Sure. In 2014, there was a poverty study done called Poverty is Hell. And in that report, we see where there were 15,000 Tobagonians, according to that 2014 report. 2014 report.
Leader of Assembly Business, if you wish to ask a question, you can request.
I believe the Leader of Government Business will speak subsequently, so he will have his time. That's right. 15,000 Tobagonians as living under the poverty level. That's 2014.
Wow.
2014. The report revealed that poverty in Tobago increased from 19% in 2005 to an alarming 24.1% in 2014. The 15,000 poor Tobagonians are living on less than TT $33.83 per day per adult.
Thanks to the PNL.
Right? And the 3,000 indigents are living on less than TT 15.89 per day and per adult. The report also is showing substantial geographical disparity of poverty as being identified in the rural communities, especially in the parishes of St. John, 33.2%, St. Paul, 36%. And these are really the communities nested between east and northeast of Tobago. Now that was 2014. Our lot could have been changed between 2014 and now. But the thing is, when you are doing a rebudgeting exercise, one expects that we look at the entire picture and be able to say, with some measure of surety, have we moved to a better position? Have we regressed? Are we at the same place? And those questions remain. Those questions linger. The issue of poverty. And I know no active politician in this house who campaigned in any election, this one or any previous election, could sit here and say that Tobago doesn't have cases of dire poverty. Because it is when you're campaigning, you're walking and going through hills and gullies and mountains and places that you won't ordinarily walk. You encounter people living under some conditions that are far less than desirable. Sure. Again, it doesn't help us to pretend that we do not have a problem. Let us treat with the problems frontally. The Secretary spoke to projects to be done on the island. He included projects to be done by central government agencies and ministries. And here is where I am having a serious challenge. Because it will seem that almost annually we get these promises of projects to be done in Tobago from ministries in Trinidad, and it's not happening now. It has been happening for a long while. And then year come, year go, and the same promises are just repeated, just regurgitated, and no one comes and says to anybody in Tobago, well, the reason why we haven't done it yet is because of X, Y, and Z, or to explain what conditions have changed. And so Tobagonians keep hearing these promises of all these projects that just keep not getting done. You know how long we're talking about the A&R Robinson International Airport? You know how long? In fact, we have been talking about it from before, because I will quote for the Secretary of Finance and Economy from the Hansard in the Parliament, from former Prime Minister Patrick Manning in 2004. And he's talking about work done from this committee that was meant to treat with the tourism in Tobago. And he's saying one of the benefits, and I'm quoting, one of the benefits that is now coming out of the work of that committee is the decision to expand the Crown Point terminal building. This is 2004. We began to address the issue of airlift, marketing, and product development as we seek to address the critical and important area of tourism in Tobago. The committee's work would have resulted in the increase of passenger arrivals in Tobago over the past 2 years. This is still in 2004. And he's committing at the time a loan facility of 110 million that was approved, And he's also committing to complete designs and to improve the and to have the component airport development. It wasn't even named A&R Robinson International Airport then. So the point is, we keep getting promises after promises. This is not the first time we have heard about new fire stations or about the Silton Hillsborough Dam. We have been talking about these projects over and over again, and we'll hear it next year and the year after, but no one comes and explains why the things that are promised are never done. And not only that, nobody on this side of the Atlantic, on this side of the pond, says anything to Trinidad when they don't get done. Nobody confronts Trinidad about these projects that they promise and don't do. And then they will have us believe that it is better when we have the same party in Tobago and the same party in Trinidad. Tobagoans are learning the hard way that that is far from better. Madam Presiding Officer, to the issue of revenue generation. And I'm happy that the Secretary spoke to this matter. He spoke about fees at tourist sites. That's fine. We agree with that. The Stolly Park quarry, we have made it clear that we don't support the new approach because the THR has never demonstrated its ability to manage a state company and to do so well. He talked about P3s, and I'm hoping to God that the P3s don't turn out to be Milsherv's 2.0 and so on. He spoke about grant funding, and he spoke about borrowing. Here's the thing that we need to get from those on the other side. Those on the other side need to be more honest in how much revenue we actually do generate. You see, those state companies, nobody in Tobago should have to come here to ask, force people to respond, because some of these state, meaning THA companies, have been in existence for a while. And their reports should be public, how much they earn, how much you intended for them to earn, and so on should have always been public. And we exist in a political situation where you just don't know. You just don't know. And I'm going to talk about Cassava Company till they're sick and tired of hearing Cassava Company. But people can't say how much money Cassava Company making. People don't even know where the capital of Paradise is. We don't know if the boat here, if it's in St. Vincent, we don't know if it's sink, we don't know if it's sell, we don't know if somebody thief it. We just don't know. And that cannot be how we manage THA companies that we intend to generate revenues from which we can draw them from. That cannot be the approach. We have to be more honest in our dealings with Tobagonians. And we formed this Stolly Park company, but how are we so sure that it will be different from the other companies formed by the THA? How do we know that it will work this time when the previous ones don't seem to have worked or they are not working? What are we going to do differently this time around? Is there an operations manual that we have that we are going to force them to operate by? What is different this time? And these are the questions that Tobagonians are asking. But, Madam Presiding Officer, it would be remiss of me not to say here, before I close, that we too understand that to treat with our economic misfortunes, we need heavy doses of creativity, we need imagination, and we do need all hands on board. We do. And we have to begin to approach governance, approach our projects differently and more creatively. We have to find a way to rekindle that spirit of volunteerism even within our communities. And so I'm going to throw open here on the floor right now that I will be writing to respective secretaries asking for their support while I simultaneously ask my residents to volunteer. What do I mean? For example, there is a need, urgent need for a breakwater system in Lucivale, and I'm starting right where I live, with the people I grew up among. Urgent need for a breakwater system. We have seen time and time again, when tide is high and the rain falls, that those living closest to the area, that they get flooded. But guess what I've done? I've gone to those residing in here and I said, look, some of you are skilled. I know some of you have done this work already, having been paid by the THA to do it. How about we do it for free this time? And let's just ask the THA to perhaps give us the required amount of stones or material we need, but we'll do it for free. And ask the THA to send their engineers to supervise, but do it for free at zero labor cost. An approach like that is an approach that can also save us money. So it's not just us cutting back on expenditure from the divisions, but we also have to cut back and change our approach to getting things done in the community. And I am willing to do that. And I'll be writing to various secretaries with similar project ideas. But I have very little confidence that they will even read, much more respond to my requests. And that's the thing. That's the kind of approach that we really need to take to be able to go forward. An approach where everyone, the entire community, gets on board. That we all do things differently and creatively. And we all see how we could save some money. Save a little here, save a little there. And we can simultaneously save while still getting things done on this island. And finally, I wish to end by quoting the first stanza from a poem I learned.
Member, your speaking time has ended.
Madam Presiding Officer, I wish to seek an extension of time for the Honorable Assemblyman.
5 minutes.
Space side
5 minutes.
to answer me.
5 minutes.
5 minutes, thanks.
Member, your speaking time has been extended by 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. So I close, and I want to close with the stanza of this poem by W.B. Yeats, entitled The Second Coming. Just the first stanza. Because sometimes when you talk to people in prose, they don't understand. So you might have to talk to them in poetry. And who knows, figurative language might be what they do understand. And W.B. Yeats said rather, turning and turning in the winding jar, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loose upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is wrong. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Madam Presiding Officer, all of us have an obligation to Tobago. All of us have an obligation to try our very best to live within the context and the means of a worsening economic cycle. we can pray for the best and work towards the best. But while we do that, there are things that all of us must do and should do. We have to be willing to give some more from ourselves. We have to change the way we govern. Accountability for how we use state resources must become paramount. We must be willing to openly share with Tobagonians how much money we have, how much we're spending, how much we need, because there are Tobagonians who can assist us, who can work with us in remedying this problem.
True.
We have to speak to even members in our constituency and ask the question, is this something you can do for yourself? Can you volunteer your service if the assembly provides the material? And these are things that we on this side are even saying we are willing to do. But to come to the house and pretend that we do not have a problem. To come here and to refuse accountability as a part of the package for remedying the problem. To come here and to wishfully say that everything is okay and nothing will be affected. Those things do us no good.
No good.
The better approach is for us to treat with the issue frontally. Let us critically analyze it. Let us go out in the fields and talk to Tobagonians. And I know members of the Exec Council have been trying these community meetings. We would have started that since after the budget presentation here in this house earlier this year. I am inviting some of you to walk with me as well, because I believe if you walk with me, you will see some of the same issues I highlighted today, and you will understand that things ain't as nice as you think it is. Perhaps this is the second coming, but whatsoever it is, we must occupy here and live here until he comes. So let us collaborate on this. And it was collaboration that we sought when we brought that motion at the last sitting, when we asked for a brand new budget with new estimates, which you said this is what we do all the time. But even after checking the Hansard records and today, clearly is not what we do all the time. That is not what we do all the time. Nonetheless, you brought a broad policy statement that we will have to work with. Let us look at it honestly, and I'll be listening keenly to hear what the respective secretaries will be saying, so that we'll see how divisions will be managing our misfortune. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Secretary of Tourism, Culture and Transportation, Councillor Nadine Stewart-Phillips.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer, for the opportunity to join this debate. I see the honourable member left the chamber right after his contribution. But I just wanted to respond to 2 points. His colleagues could probably give him the message, or he may probably look on from outside. The honourable member invited the Secretary of Finance and by extension, the Chief Secretary to join him and accompany him on his walks in his electoral district. But, Madam Presiding Officer, the member should probably invite his political leader and minority councillor Watsuduke, who happens to be my area representative and has been and is the most absent representative that I have ever encountered. And so before the representative for Speyside Lands for me, Charlottesville, invites we on this side, he should be looking at himself and his minority leader. Madam Presiding Officer, the honorable member spoke, and I think he referred to the Hansard that spoke to upgrades not being done at the international airport, but he was probably too busy swimming that he had no chance to realize that the domestic terminal has been improved. The domestic departure lounge has been upgraded. The international departure lounge has been upgraded. The tarmac has been upgraded. But Madam Presiding Officer, the conversation going forward centers around a new terminal building. That is what the conversation is now centered around, and I'm happy to mention, Madam Presiding Officer, that the Chief Secretary, the Honorable Deputy Chief Secretary, and myself and other members at the Division of Tourism, Culture and Transportation, we have been engaging in discussions with the Airport Authority and the Civil Aviation Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, Madam Presiding Officer, I have a lot of content, and so I rest my case on the Honorable Member for space time. Madam Presiding Officer, as the Secretary with responsibility for the Division of Tourism, Culture and Transportation, I would like to confine my contribution to the measures that my division will be implementing to mitigate the shortfall in the budgetary allocation. And Madam Presiding Officer, I seek your leave under Standing Order 42.6, just so that I can refer extensively to my notes. Madam Presiding Officer, notwithstanding the reduction in allocation, I am confident that as a Tobago House of Assembly, we are able and we are equipped to do more with less. Now more than ever, prudent management of the Tobago House of Assembly's finances will be required. And the Deputy Chief Secretary, in piloting the motion, I want to reinforce one of the points that he made, and I want to commend the Honorable Chief Secretary for his visionary leadership and proactive thinking. And I say that, Madam President, because in the lead up to the national budget, as an executive council, we will continuously assessing the financial uncertainties and the fluctuating oil prices. And all secretaries were mandated to revise our estimates of expenditure to reflect a 5%, 10%, and 15% reduction. And this reinforces the point that even before the national budget was read, we would have already made adjustments within our divisions in anticipation of a shortfall, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, as the Secretary of Tourism, Culture and Transportation, I am thankful for the opportunity to be at the helm of the division charged with responsibility for the sustainable development of the tourism industry at this critical juncture when the central government has also acknowledged the key role that tourism can play in diversifying the national economy. Madam Presiding Officer, ideally, funding should be allocated in such a manner to reflect the central government's intent to employ tourism as a key economic driver. However, Madam Presiding Officer, the reality of reduced allocations compels the Division of Tourism, Culture and Transportation, compels the Tobago House of Assembly, it compels all of us to be creative, to adopt creative approaches in managing existing resources while at the same time increasing productivity. And it is against this backdrop, Madam Presiding Officer, that I would like to paint a picture of optimism, a picture of dynamism, a picture of innovation as we seek to achieve significant wins for the tourism industry here in Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, and I want to mention the Honorable Chief Secretary again for his decision to merge culture with tourism, and that was not an arbitrary decision, Madam Presiding Officer. It was a strategic move to utilize two very important industries that are mutually beneficial to each other, as well as to Tobago's sustained economic growth. Madam Presiding Officer, I led a delegation that participated in this year's State of the Tourism Industry Conference held in Grenada and coordinated by the Caribbean Tourism Organization. And this delegation benefited from some of the best examples of how destinations and businesses and attractions drive value through outstanding experiences that meet the constantly changing expectations of visitors. And of notable mention was the constant reference to the idea that the new explorer is spending more on experiences. They want to immerse themselves into the culture and the heritage of a destination. And the Division of Tourism, Culture and Transportation, we are now appropriately configured to leverage Tobago's rich culture as a platform for our tourism thrust. In an extremely crowded tourism marketplace, Madam Presiding Officer, it is critical that Tobago develops a distinct product and brand that offers the destination a competitive edge if we are to be successful in this industry. And harnessing the synergies between culture and transportation will provide such an advantage as culture now becomes our unique selling point, and whilst generating and highlighting the value of our culture and generating support for our cultural heritage. Madam Presiding Officer, it is no secret that the tourism sector has had its fair share of challenges here in Tobago. Nevertheless, Madam Presiding Officer, direct international passenger arrivals to Tobago for fiscal 2016-2017 increased by 7.4% when compared to 2015-2016. In 2015-2016, there were 26,050 direct international passenger arrivals, whereas in 2016-2017, we had 27,965. Indirect international passenger arrivals to Tobago for the financial year 2016-2017 was 7,410, when compared to 2015-2016, which had 4,676 arrivals. Domestic passenger arrivals by air to Tobago for 2016-2017, 485,882 persons, and this represented a 2% increase in arrivals from 2015-2016. Domestic ferry passenger arrivals to Tobago for the financial year was 2016-2017 was recorded at 276,981 passengers. This reflected a 38% decrease when compared to the previous financial year, 2015-2016. Madam Presiding Officer, however, this decline was due mainly to the problems associated with the inter-island ferry that resulted in fewer sailing between the islands. And Madam Presiding Officer, much has been said and much continues to be said about the decline in arrivals, but the research clearly indicates that there has been an increase, with the exception of the arrivals by sea, which attributed, again, as I mentioned, the experience programs, and again, the Speyside, Lands for Me, Palatouvier, forgot to mention that major upgrade works are currently underway at the Speyside Beach facility. He passes there every day. It's in Luciville. And the intention, Madam Presiding Officer, is to have it completed before this quarter. He made no mention of that. Madam Presiding Officer, smoke detectors and fire alarms were installed at all beach facilities and historical sites. We reintroduced lifeguard services at the Buko Integrated Facility Station. The division in relation to marketing efforts, Madam Presiding Officer, we hosted a mega farm comprising 11 agents from the UK in July of 2017, and a 16-page telegraph supplement was produced as a result of this activity. The destination participated in the British Birdwatching Fair during the period August 18th to 20th, 2017, and we partnered with 3 major niche tour operators to promote the destination, Mutt Travel and the Natural Traveler. Mutt Travel, Madam President, has reported to us at the division that they confirmed 28 enquiries for birding holidays and 10 bookings to Tobago coming out of that bird-watching festival. Madam Presiding Officer, in the Department of Culture, we have the Arts for the Aging program, which is built on the understanding of the vital relationship between creative expression and healthy aging. And thus far in 2017, the Senior Showcase met approximately 110 persons discussing an array of senior-related topics, including will preparation and home safety. We have the phenomenal Women in Arts program, and this brings to the fore an all-mature women's group performing company, engaging in dance, drumming, etc. And for 2017, already that group was able to produce 10 mature female dancers and 10 mature dancers who performed at the Tobago Heritage Festival. And so, Madam President, these are some of the Presiding Officer, these are some of the projects and initiatives that the division was able to successfully undertake. However, we are cognizant that there is still much to be done. Madam Presiding Officer, I indicated in my introduction that I would outline measures that my division will be implementing to mitigate the shortfall in the budgetary allocation. The Division of Tourism, Culture and Transportation received an allocation of $188,723,000, of which $162,032,032 has been disaggregated as recurrent expenditure, and that accounts for 83% of the overall divisional. And because of the fact, Madam Presiding Officer, that recurrent expenditure accounts for such a significant portion of the total allocation, proper management of these funds are critical to mitigating the challenges in the national economy. And the Secretary of Finance mentioned, and that would have been one signal that the Chief Secretary sent, that all employment levels are going to be maintained. And as such, greater emphasis must be placed on productivity, on operational efficiency, and in essence, value for money. Madam Presiding Officer, upon assuming office and having assessed the financial position of the division, I purpose to ensure that the Division of Tourism, Culture and Transportation was streamlined in a way to reflect productivity. And in light of this, very early in my tenure, I took a decision to utilize daily rated employees to provide janitorial services at the main offices. And Madam Presiding Officer, this will result in an estimated annual saving of $2.3 million that would have been paid to janitorial companies. Madam Presiding Officer, we have to ensure that there are stringent measures in place to continue our efforts to reduce recurrent expenditure. And the following seemingly simple initiatives have the potential to assist in significant cost savings. Electricity, turning off of the lights, taking, when you are leaving the office on afternoons to go home, switching the air conditioning units off. Stationery, printing back and front, and I started this morning as I printed my speech back and front, Madam Presiding Officer. Implementing cost-saving measures as well by early planning and negotiating better with our suppliers. And to achieve this, we will be working closely with the newly established procurement units to ensure that the division gets value for money and the job offerings are spread across all sectors in a shared and developing economy. Implementing monitoring and evaluation systems to ensure that projects are completed on time and within budget. Developing an effective performance management system to ensure that employee appraisals are done on a timely basis and corrective measures can be put in place to address gaps in employee performance. And this, of course, is in alignment with the Assembly Performance Management Framework exercise that the Tobago House of Assembly is currently participating in. Providing training for staff, Madam Presiding Officer, to ensure that job performance and service delivery is improved. And in September of this year at the division, we utilized in-house expertise to provide all of our employees in our promotions and in our promotions unit with customer excellence training. And the outcome, Madam President, was twofold. There was a savings of approximately $50,000 and a realization of service excellence. Madam Presiding Officer, I move to festivals. And placing all of the festivals under one umbrella is one of the strategies being adopted by the division as part of our cost-saving measures and using a structured approach to working. And so the division received allocations to assist with Carnival, Jazz, Heritage, Dragon Boat, Blue Food, Carifesta, all the festivals that Tobago currently has. Our Tobago Carnival, our Tobago Jazz Experience, the Tobago Heritage, and the Tobago Blue Food Festivals are some of our key festival tourism products. And we have to ensure that our Tobago Carnival is developed in a way that caters to and attracts a clientele seeking a slightly different experience from our sister island Trinidad. And while the event's vibe, look and feel should not be too distinct from Trinidad, it must be refined and promoted in a manner that distinguishes it as a carnival experience that is exclusively and uniquely Tobagonian. Madam Presiding Officer, the Blue Food Festival was already executed for this financial year. It was held on October 15th, and I can say that there was a significant reduction in expenditure for staging that event. The lead time for planning provided enough time for negotiations to ensue, and overall, we looked at utilizing more cost-effective alternatives. And these measures, Madam Presiding Officer, in no way compromised the quality of the event. And I would, just at this juncture, like to commend the staff at the division and the residents of Lansome, Palotivier, Bloody Bay, who continue to make this event a success. And some of the volunteers as well, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, the Tobago Jazz Experience has been in existence for 9 years. The festival has been reviewed to determine the socio-economic benefits it offers to the island and the tourism business unit. This festival was reviewed by an evaluation and strategic task force committee headed by Dr. Keith Nurse. The task force carried out extensive research working with stakeholders in both the private and public sector to ascertain the challenges that hampered the growth of the festival over the years, as well as identified opportunities to be seized in the future. And as we go forward, the actions to be taken will be closely monitored and assessed based on its ability to deliver the following: boost ticket sales and other sources of earned income, expand and widen corporate sponsorship, manage production expenses, enhance the marketing and branding of the event and the destination. And in the end, the Tobago Jazz Experience will become the festival's tourism flagship event that it is intended to be. Madam Presiding Officer, I move to international airlift and cruise. And under transportation, airlift and cruise, the division received an allocation of $40 million. And the intention, Madam Presiding Officer, is to maintain our current airlift out of our major source markets, the UK and Germany. And it was just on the 11th of this month, 2 Sundays ago, that our winter-only flight out of Manchester in the UK with Thomas Cook was resumed. We have British Airways flying 2 times weekly out of Gatwick, London, as well as Virgin Airlines. From Frankfurt, Germany, Condor Airlines, and also direct airlift out of John F. Kennedy Airport with Caribbean Airlines. And so, Madam Presiding Officer, the point must be made that Tobago does not lack airlift. What we do have is a lot of unused capacity, and that represents an opportunity for us. And we must develop strategic marketing visibility to fill the capacity and win over the other islands that we share these flights with, win over their market share. And this will be one of the functions and the short-term focus of the Tobago Tourism Agency, which I will speak to later in my contribution. In the area of cruise, Madam Presiding Officer, the cruise industry remains a segment of the leisure travel market that continues to experience rapid and consistent growth. As the Division of Tourism, Culture and Transportation works alongside the newly formed Tobago Tourism Agency and all tourism stakeholders to build a stronger, more sustainable tourism product, we are, of course, excited and grateful that Destination Tobago is now in a position to capitalize on the constantly expanding cruise season. Madam Presiding Officer, this cruise season we are expecting in excess of 103,000 passengers and 67 plus calls to the destination. And I say plus because yesterday I returned to my office to an email of 2 additional cruise ships coming into Scarborough Port in December. And this figure represents one of the highest arrivals that we can expect for cruise in Destination Tobago. We welcomed our first cruise ship on November 15th with approximately 1,070 passengers, most of which, Madam Presiding Officer, most of whom, disembarked and took tours around Tobago. On Monday, we had the Adonia, and tomorrow, Friday, we have the Marella Cruises on its main voyage to Tobago, and it has a capacity in excess of 3,000 passengers. And so again, Madam Presiding Officer, even as we look forward to cruise season 2018-2019, we must engage in the discussions now, which is also a function of the Tobago Tourism Agency. Madam President, in the area of tourism, we have seen what sport can do for us, not only as a destination, but rather as a country. And we are keen on developing sport tourism on the island. We have been provided with an allocation of $2 million to assist with the development and support of sport tourism on the island. Tobago has seen over the past decade an increase in sport-related activities, including the cycling classic, dragon boat, C2C marathon, game fishing tournament, just to name a few. So there will be a move to strengthen the resource capabilities in the division to place greater emphasis on this niche. The aim, Madam Presiding Officer, is to revitalize the Sport Tourism Committee, which will comprise representation from the Division of Tourism, the Division of Sport and Youth Affairs, also persons from the private sector as well. And they will be charged and expected to work closely with the sport tourism promoters and organizations to develop new and enhance existing sport tourism offerings to ensure they become sustainable. Having been in existence for a number of years, Madam Presiding officers, Madam Presiding Officer, these sport tourism promoters, they must look extensively to becoming sustainable in the near future so that they can support their event, of course, with the necessary guidance that will be facilitated by the Sport Tourism Committee. Madam Presiding Officer, under the Department of Culture for recurrent expenditure, the division received allocations for cultural programs, cultural groups, and the Tobago Indigenous and Traditional Arts Academy. And we are prepared, Madam Presiding Officer, to lead the way in the cultural thrust to preserve and promote Tobago's culture. The division will place greater emphasis on the creative and cultural industries as another means of economic diversification. We must recognize the enormous potential of our island and its people, and it is for this reason the division will accelerate the development of our human resources through the expansion of our performing arts training program, our Carnival Arts Develop program, certification of practitioners through the Community School for the Arts program, and the Tobago Indigenous and Traditional Arts Academy. And as it relates to the Tobago Indigenous and Traditional Arts Academy, the idea is to enhance the division's role by adding a structured approach through a curriculum-based training initiative for Indigenous, traditional, and contemporary arts. And the main goals, Madam Presiding Officer, are preservation, contextualization, and dissemination, and the certification of Tobago's cultural art forms. The identified accredited agency, Madam Presiding Officer, is the National Training Agency, and MOU is currently with the Legal Department of the Tobago House of Assembly for review, and it is proposed that this MOU will be the formal agreement between the division and the NTA. What is of notable mention, Madam Presiding Officer, is that Tobago will be the only Caribbean island where one can be certified in both indigenous and traditional arts and can therefore obtain CVQ status, which is Caribbean Vocational Qualification, through the NTA for this program. And this would mean, Madam Presiding Officer, again, economic benefits for Tobago can be realized as the whole idea of research tourism will now be in focus. Madam Presiding Officer, that in a nutshell spoke to our recurrent expenditure under the Division of Tourism, Culture and Transportation, and I want to spend just a few minutes on our development program allocation. Under DP, Madam Presiding Officer, the division was allocated $26,700,000 and represents 7% of the overall divisional allocation. And this is where, Madam Presiding Officer, emphasis will be placed on prioritizing projects and bringing to completion rather than attempting to do everything at once and nothing gets completed. Under sites, attractions, and facilities, Madam Presiding Officer, it is of utmost importance that our domestic, even our local and international visitors enjoy wonderful experiences.
Member, your speaking time has ended.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I beg to have the speaking time of the member extended by a further 10 minutes.
Members, the question put is to have the speaking time of the member extended by 10 minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against?
Aye.
Councillor Nadine Stewart-Phillips, your speaking time has been extended by 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. Thank you very much, colleagues. Under sites and attractions, I would have to run through here. We are looking at phase 3 of the Fort King George Heritage Park to be completed. And Madam Presiding Officer, already in an effort to improve our existing tourism and cultural products on the island, the division only recently introduced a new product offering to residents and visitors alike, and that is the Fort King George reenactment. This comprises several outdoor theatrical presentations which highlights significant historical relics found on Fort King George. The interactive theater presentations is one of the many initiatives implemented by the division to make the Tobago experience a unique one. This park is intended to generate revenue and is expected to become operational in January 2018. Madam Presiding Officer, just running through quickly again on the development programs, restoration of historical sites, focus on the Gangang Sera burial site. We have island-wide signage, as well as our community awareness program. But one of the topics I wanted to ensure I cover, Madam Presiding Officer, even as I spoke about our allocation and how we intend to use our allocation, I want to touch on the capacity for revenue generation. The Division of Tourism, Culture and Transportation currently generates revenue from applications for use of beach facilities and historical sites. And we have a number of beach facilities, including Charlottesville, Speyside, Kings Bay, historical sites, all our forts, etc. And these sites and facilities are usually requested for birthday celebrations, baptism, and for the period March to October 2017, the division accrued in excess of $30,000 for the use of its sites and facilities for the activities I mentioned before. The division also generates revenue from concessionaire spaces at Charlottesville, Speyside, Kings Bay, Fort Granby, Bloody Bay Beach facilities. There will now be, we would now do deliberate marketing of these sites and facilities with the propensity to generate even greater revenue. Madam Presiding Officer, I must touch on the recently established Tobago Tourism Agency Limited. And the core mandate of the Tobago Tourism Agency Limited is to lead the redevelopment of the island's tourism products and the marketing and repositioning of Tobago as a premier destination founded on the principles of sustainable development. And while the agency will continue to focus on the development of our traditional tourism niche segments, dive, bird watching, honeymoon, etc., it will give keen attention to developing the potential of emerging segments such as cruise, cultural heritage, adventure, and wellness. Recently, Madam Presiding Officer, the Board of the Tourism Agency recruited a chief executive officer in the person of Mr. Louis Lewis. Now, the agency will facilitate rebuilding a destination that is competitive and sustainable, which will require the establishment of quality standards, training of workers, research on the impacts and contribution of tourism, the development of quality products and services, and the facilitation of investment into the island's tourism industry. And in order to fulfill its mandate, the agency will be working through the public and private sector stakeholders and local, regional, and international partners in aviation, cruise, and hospitality sectors. Now, marketing our destination is crucial as it serves to inform the world of who we are, where we are, and the agency is charged with utilizing creative means to market destination Tobago. And one of the intentions is to place emphasis on digital marketing, which provides a wider platform for greater reach and more visibility. Our technology continues to evolve, and visitors are keeping up with the times as they are looking for attractiveness, ease of retrieving information, and the need to have information at their fingertips. So as I wrap up, Madam Presiding Officer, I would have outlined the actions to be taken as we work towards revitalizing Tobago's tourism sector. We are cognizant, Madam Presiding Officer, that there are challenges to overcome, and I can assure the people of Tobago that this administration is working assiduously to address them. However, we cannot do it alone. Collaboration and commitment are paramount. As such, we look forward to working with stakeholders, all stakeholders, and the people of Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, I have confidence in the destination. I have confidence in our future. And again, I invite all Tobagonians to get on board, even while we as individuals make personal adjustments in these challenging economic times. I thank you.
Assemblyman Shumari Hector, Assistant Secretary in Community Development.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I want to begin by thanking our Deputy Chief Secretary and Secretary in the Division of Finance and the Economy for his presentation as it speaks to what we are prepared to do and how we are prepared to realign and reorganize our priorities in order to service the interests and the needs of Tobagonians for the realization or toward the realization of our common good and collective goals. I wish also to thank my colleague who would have spoken immediately before me, because what she has done is to clarify a lot of the things that I would wish to speak to, particularly since the whole business of community development is concerned with people's development. And so I want to thank you most especially, because this is new to me, and your being a veteran, having served in capacities similar to this, allows me to use your template in order to speak directly to the people of Tobago in a language that they would understand and appreciate. So I thank you that I am able to fall in your tutelage. I want to start as she would have started, not to be a copycat, but to remind the people of Tobago that on this side of the divide, we take our business of providing leadership and direction for the people of Tobago seriously. And so it came as no surprise to us. In fact, we were able to respond with practical readiness to the reductions in the budgetary allocation afforded us by the central government for the fiscal 2018. Because we were able, as the councillor would have said before, to engage ourselves in some scenario plannings that afforded us an opportunity to look at things objectively and practically, and to begin to make and prepare ourselves to make decisions that will redound to the benefit of all peoples, not just here in Tobago, but to those who will also grace our shores. Madam Presiding Officer, I stand today in my capacity as Assistant Secretary in the Division of Community Development, Enterprise Development, and Labor. And I know by now my colleagues are holding their breath because they anticipate me saying, and I will not disappoint, that I serve in the best division in the Tobago House of Assembly. The evidence of which is in their lack of stun and surprise represented on their faces. In the division, Madam Presiding Officer, our responsibility and our mandate is concerned with providing for the social and economic development of the peoples of Tobago. Our mission, similarly, is a noble one that we bear aloft and one that we pride ourselves in, which is to build strong families, self-sustaining communities, and a healthy and productive workforce. Madam Presiding Officer, I seize this opportunity to speak to some of the plans and some of the activities which we intend to undertake as a division. And like would have been said by the Deputy Chief Secretary, there is no need for a new budget because we would have taken all precautionary actions and measures to ensure that everything that we would have submitted in our first intimation reflects what we are able to do regardless of the state of the economy. And that is simply to improve the quality of our people's lives. Madam Presiding Officer, I want to start from a very global perspective and narrow it down as I continue. But I am also hoping to be relatively short because there's much to be said by everyone. The first thing I wish to point out, Madam Presiding Officer, is that when we assumed office some 9 months ago, we came in to an already bad situation. A bad situation not characterized by former leadership or not characterized by the decisions made in the past and in olden times. But rather we came into a bad situation because the world as we know it recognized some economic challenges. And Madam Presiding Officer, when we first came in, we told the people of Tobago calmly and clearly that we were operating on a budget shortfall of about $600 million. While it is true that one may argue that the situation has not improved, and while it is true that one might argue that the situation perhaps has worsened, we recognize as an administration and as a leadership on the island that we are living in very exciting times. And I say that simply because the challenges of today affords us an opportunity, Madam Presiding Officer, to be able to introspect, to dig deeply within ourselves, but more importantly, to begin to look at each other for solutions. You see, we have recognized now more than ever, Madam Presiding Officer, that nobody could govern alone, that we need each other, and that we need stakeholder investment, participation, collaboration, and we need the kinds of synergies that is necessary to move our thrust forward. Madam Presiding Officer, one of the things which we have purpose to do as a division is to decentralize THA and governmental services. And this affords us an opportunity to deliver close to families and within communities the very services which they are dependent on in order to improve their prospects and improve the quality of their lives. We recognize, Madam Presiding Officer, that the day is done for Tobagonians to try to navigate the course of the roads and the courses of their lives in order to get to one institution or one facility to access one service. We are saying on this side of the divide that the time has come for us to make those services available to people within their places of abode, within their communities, and within close proximity to their lives as they know it. Madam Presiding Officer, I wish also to indicate that as a result of this consciousness, we did a few things on this side of the divide. And one of the first things we did is that we recognized that it cannot be business as usual, but instead the time has come for it to be business as unusual. And so we began to take some critical introspections of ourselves and of our actions and our attitudes, which gave us an opportunity, Madam Presiding Officer, to see that we need to begin to make certain kinds of cuts and to begin to pattern certain kinds of adjustments. You have heard the Honorable Chief Secretary say time and time repeatedly that that cut is even reflected in what we received during the luncheon period after the meeting of the Executive Council. I am yet to see it reflected in my physical anatomy. But be that as it may, Madam Presiding Officer, we know all too well that the time really has come for us to do things differently. In the Division of Community Development, we have received recurrent expenditure amounting to $49.3 million and developmental to $10.5 million, which reflects in percentage just about 43 to 45% of what we asked for initially. And so we know that with significantly less, the time has come for us to do significantly more. And one of the ways we have recognized that will help us to do significantly more with significantly less is to partner and to build synergies. And so we have already begun taking steps and taking actions, Madam Presiding Officer, to ensure that all of the resources available to us in the Division of Community Development, Enterprise Development and Labor will be made available to every division across the length and breadth of Tobago and the Tobago House of Assembly. And we also have their commitment to ensure that their resources will be made equally available to us. You see, for us, Madam Presiding Officer, we recognize that part of the national thrust, which seeks to focus now more than ever on tourism, agriculture, and entrepreneurship, must be realized at the level of the community. I want to pause sufficiently long to thank my secretary and my administrator, as well as all of the members of the staff within my division, for the noble work which they have done over the past few months to ensure that we continue to rise to the occasion. Our division comprises 4 departments, and these include community development.
Members, the sitting will now be suspended for lunch and will resume at 1:15 p.m. The 9th sitting of the Tobago House of Assembly Legislature will be held on Thursday, the 23rd of November, 2017 from 10 in the morning. In 2013, a decision was taken by the then members of the House to have a second debate on the Tobago budget after the national budget was read and Tobago's allocation was verified. Similarly, the motion this Thursday by Deputy Chief Secretary and Secretary of Finance and the Economy, Assemblyman Joel Jack, will be based on Tobago's 2018 allocation from central government and seeks support from the House for measures to be implemented by the Executive Council in its efforts to mitigate against the impact of challenges in the national economy. As your presiding officer, Dr. Denise Soyafat-Angus, I invite you to join us for this significant debate, which is important to your future. This Thursday, the 23rd November from 10 a.m. I hope to see you there.
There are hidden stories about Tobago's history tucked away in the memories of men and women who served in the Assembly. They hold the key to unlocking some of the knowledge surrounding Tobago's legislative history. The Assembly Legislature Secretariat is an apolitical division that oversees the plenary sitting on the 4th Thursday of each month, where the public can view debates on Tobago's affairs. But Tobago's legislative authority did not begin with the current Tobago House of Assembly. The first formation of the legislative representation was in 1768 at the island's former capital, Georgetown, now Studley Park, with a 13-member elected House of Assembly, a lower house and the appointed Legislative Council, and the upper house. 1 year later, Scarborough became the island's new capital, and consequentially the seat of Tobago's politics was relocated. These were during colonial times, when the operations of the Assembly favored the European settlers. The abolition in slavery in 1834 was the catalyst for empowerment throughout the world. Tobago was not exempt from this movement towards self-rule. In 1877, representative government was abolished, with the Crown Colony introduced to handle the administration of the island. In 1889, Tobago was joined with Trinidad by the British government. The Tobago House of Assembly was created by Act 37 of 1980 for making better provisions for the administration of Tobago and for matters therein. It comprises 7 divisions, each representing a developmental concern. THA has legislative arm and the executive arm. In addition to 10 divisions, 9 with particular remits, plus the Office of the Chief Secretary, which oversees the others. There is so much to learn, and to help you do this, the Secretariat now has an archive project for all assemblymen from 1980 to present. Today we start with a few officials who served in between 1980 and 1988. In 1980, the Assembly was led by a chairman. At this time, it was Arthur Napoleon Raymond Robinson, now deceased.
That 1977 motion by A.N.R. Robinson, which led to the creation of the current Tobago House of Assembly by Act 37 of 1980, because I understood the need and the desire for Tobagonians for self-determination, I appreciated the effort, and I somewhat associated with that greater autonomy for the people of Tobago. So I understood the struggle, I understood the reason, and therefore, while the PNM contested that election in 1980 and lost, we won 4 seats and the then DAC won 8. I understood the need for greater autonomy for Tobago.
At that time, there were 2 political parties represented in the Assembly. Mr. Calendar was on the minority side held by the People's National Movement, but control of the House was with Mr. Robinson and the Democratic Action Congress.
We are the architect of self-government for Tobago, and the Parliament would have decided that Tobago should have its internal self-government in 1977. However, when the legislation was passed in Parliament, and that legislation, as you know, is Act number 37 of 1980, to give effect to the decision of Parliament, it stopped woefully short of giving us international government.
And that has always been our mantra. From 1984 to all our years, internal self-government was foremost in our mind. And that's even why A.N.R. Robinson went to Parliament and debated on internal self-government for all those years. And that is why instead of giving us internal self-government, they gave us this partial management of Tobago, which is more of an administrative kind of a situation.
As a lot of people do not know, we worked for about 5 to 8 months without a salary. The central government in Trinidad didn't care to give Tobago House of Assembly, and so they were not working for a harmonious relationship between the Tobago House of Assembly and the central government.
From the year 1980 to present, administrative changes have been made to ensure that the Tobago House of Assembly expands to make responsibility for more of the day-to-day matters on the island.
Well, of course, most of it are administrative changes. First, there was no executive council when it started, because the executive
and our plenary sittings took place there. Most of our committee meetings took place at the Fairfield complex.